Hi. Uh, there was a time YouTube would let me record with this camera for 30 minutes. Now I can't record for 17 minutes, so I'll try to make this thing under 15 minutes and maybe it won't be rejected. Anyway, what I was reading, so part 2 is rejected, and I don't want to read it again. No. Instead, I'll just give you the synopsis of what I read. And the synopsis is that the guys were tortured under ISIS. Uh, they were chained up, but if they accepted the Quran, then they could walk around their cells. And Mr. Foley, the one who had his head sawed off, really seemed sincere about wanting to be a Muslim. And he was actually interested in the Quran and stuff, which goes against Quran 9, verse 5 and 6. In verse 9, 5, it says to rise up and slay non-Muslims after sacred months are passed, unless they become Muslim and want to hear the Quran read to them. Then they're given free passage. And he did that, apparently, and they still sawed his head off. So the moral of the story is, if you're captured by ISIS, it doesn't matter if you become a Muslim or not. They're still going to probably kill you, because they won't really trust you. They think, you're just acting like you're a Muslim. And so, yeah, if you believe in Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, you might as well continue to not lie and say that you're not. The thing that's interesting, in Quran 16:106, a Muslim is able to lie and deny Allah if he's, quote, under compulsion or under duress. Of course, they don't mention how much compulsion and duress they have to feel, or how cowardly they have to feel around non-Muslims to deny Allah. Muslims say, no, if you put a gun to my head, then I can deny Allah. It doesn't mention anything like that in Quran 16:106. It just says, if under duress, you can deny Allah. But it doesn't mention how much duress or how much compulsion. So anyway, I'll continue here. Yeah, so anyway, what I told you there, you don't have to read that part now. So just save yourself 17 minutes here. But I'll try to finish it here. Okay. A terrorist state. The Syrian civil war, previously dominated by secular rebels and a handful of rival jihadist groups, was shifting decisively, and the new extremist group had taken a dominant position. Sometime last year, the battalion in the Aleppo hospital pledged allegiance to what was then called the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Other factions of fighters joined. Forces with the group, whose tactics were so extreme that even Al-Qaeda expelled it from its terrorist network. Its ambitions went too far, toppling Bashar Assad, Syria's president. Last year, the jihadists began pulling their prisoners, bringing them to the same locations underneath the hospital. By January, there were at least 19 men in 120 square meter cell, about 215 square feet, and 4 women in an adjoining one. All but one of them were European or North American. The relatively freedom Mr. Foley and Mr. Cantley had enjoyed came to an abrupt end. So much for becoming a Muslim and saying you love the Quran and all that. Each prisoner was now handcuffed to another. More worrying was the fact that their French-speaking guards were replaced by English-speaking ones. Mr. Foley recognized them with dread. They were the ones who had called him naughty during the worst torture. They were the ones the hostages called the Beatles. They instituted a strict security protocol. When they approached the cell holding Mr. Suter and Polish journalists, they called out, Abba Aba'in, the Arabic word for number 40. That was his cue to face the wall so that when the guards entered, they would not see their faces. Several hostages were given numbers in Arabic, which appeared to be an effort to catalog them, not unlike the numbers of American forces that had assigned to prisoners in the detention facilities that ran in Iraq, including Camp Bucca, where Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State, was briefly held. But when the Beatles took over, they wanted to bring a certain level of order to the hostages, said one of the recently freed European captives. The jihadists had gone from obscurity to running what they called a state. In areas under their control, they established an intricate bureaucracy, including a tribunal, a police force, and even a consumer protection office, which forced kebab stands to close for selling low-quality products. That focus on order extended to the hostages. After months of holding them without making any advance, jihadists suddenly devised a plan to ransom them. Starting last November, each prisoner was told to hand over the email addresses of a relative. Mr. Foley gave the address of his younger brother. The group sent a blitz of messages to the families of the hostages. Those who were able to lay the emails side by side could see that they had been cut and pasted from the same template. Triage. By December, the militants had exchanged several emails from Mr. Foley's family, as well as with the families of other hostages. After the first proof of life questions, Mr. Foley was hopeful that he would be home soon. As his second Christmas away from home approached, he threw himself into organizing a jailhouse version of Secret Santa, a tradition in the Foley household. Each prisoner gave another gift fashioned out of trash. Mr. Foley's Secret Santa gave him a circle made from the wax of a discarded candle to cushion his forehead when he bowed down to pray on the hard floor. Oh, he really was a Muslim, and they still sawed his head off. As the weeks passed, Mr. Foley noticed that his European cellmates were invited outside again and again to answer questions. He was not, nor were the other Americans or the Britons. Soon the prisoners realized that their kidnappers had identified which nations were most likely to pay ransoms, said a former hostage, one of 5 who spoke about their imprisonment in the Islamic State's network of jails on the conditions that their names be withheld. Quote, the kidnappers knew which countries would be the most amenable to their demands, and they created an order based on the ease with which they thought they could negotiate. One said, they started with the Spanish. One day the guards came in and pointed to the 3 Spanish captives. They said that they knew that the Spanish government had paid 6 million euros for a group of aid workers kidnapped by a Qaeda cell in Mauritania, a figure available online in articles about the episode. As the negotiations for the Spanish prisoners progressed rapidly. Oh, by the way, you want to know something? Holding people ransom in Islam is perfectly fine. Yeah. Read Sahih Muslim Sahih Muslim 8:34-32, 8:34-33, and there's also another one that actually is about ransom and how they can have sex with the women they're ransoming and even get pregnant. As the negotiations for the Spanish prisoners progressed rapidly, the first was released this March, 6 months after he had been captured. The militants moved on to the 4 French journalists, and French usually pay the ransom. European prisoners went from answering additional personal questions to filming videos to be sent to their families or governments. The videos became more and more charged, eventually including death threats and execution deadlines in an effort to force the nations to pay. At one point, the jailers arrived with a collection of orange jumpsuits. In the video, they lined up the French journalists in their brightly colored uniforms, mimicking those worn by prisoners in the United States facility in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. They also began waterboarding a select few, just as CIA interrogators had treated Muslim prisoners, that so-called black sites, during the George W. Bush administration. Former hostages and witnesses said, "What? Oh my gosh, what did they do? Put panties on their head? Oh my gosh, that's horrible." With time, the 23 prisoners were divided into two groups. The 3 American men and the 3 British hostages were singled out for the worst abuse, both because of the militants' grievances against their countries and because the government would not negotiate, according to several people with intimate knowledge of the events. Quote, "It's part of the DNA of this group to hate America," one said, but they also realized the United States and Britain were the least likely to pay. Within this subset, the person who suffered the cruelest treatment, the former hostages said, was Mr. Foley. In addition to receiving prolonged beatings, he underwent mock executions and was repeatedly waterboarded. Okay, and it didn't matter he was a Muslim. So, if you're captured by ISIS or some Muslim group, don't deny Christ. Just let them saw your head off, because they're going to saw it off anyway. Within the subset, the person who suffered the cruelest treatment, the former hostage said, was Mr. Foley. Yeah. Okay. He was waterboarded. Yeah. He underwent mock executions. Meant to stimulate drowning, the procedure can cause the victim to pass out. When one of the prisoners was hauled out, the others were relieved if he came back bloodied. When one of the prisoners was hauled out, the others were relieved if he came back bloodied. It was when there was no blood, a former cellmate said, that they knew he had suffered something even worse. As the negotiations dragged on, conditions became increasingly grim. During one extended stretch, the hostages received the equivalent of a teacup of food per day. They spent weeks in darkness. In one basement, the only illumination was the finger of sunlight that stretched under the locked door. After dusk, they could not see anything, spilling food on themselves, until their guards eventually gave them a flashlight. Most of the locations had no mattresses and few blankets. I think I gotta stop here. Yeah, I better. Or they're not gonna. I bet it. If this goes after 50 minutes, they won't upload it. Yeah, it's like half, and pretty soon they're not gonna, I bet they won't let me upload anything, being that I have a tendency to expose Islam. But